What's up, everybody? Justin here to do an unexpected video episode of The List. Episode 14, 15, one of those. I'll put the episode in the description of this video. This is a new list. I'm going to talk about and discuss kind of some breaking news. I mean, it's pretty big news. The guy was a mid-carder for a long time, but it's still big news. Jack Swagger. Jack Swagger has been released by WWE, but he really wasn't released because he asked for his release and he was granted it. So Jack Swagger called into Beyond the Fight podcast, hosted by MMA fighter Chael Sonnen, to drop some big news that earlier this week he asked for and was granted his release from WWE. This comes after months of not appearing on WWE TV. Swagger is a former world champion in WWE. That was a long time ago, people. Like 2010. That was right after WrestleMania 26 when he cashed in, won the World Heavyweight Championship. I apologize for my phone making noises. Forgot to put it on airplane mode. Anyways, so if you hear the phone buzzing going off, that's probably my Twitter blowing up. So I apologize for that. So Swagger, as I said, former world heavyweight champion on the SmackDown brand when he cashed in on Chris Jericho in 2010, maybe 2009. I'll read that information later, and a little bit of information on Swagger's career. So this, as I said, he's a former world champion, and this might come as a surprise to some, not to me. I'm not shocked at all that Swagger wants to leave. I'm sure he was miserable and fed up and just, wasting his life away, wasting his career away. Yes, I'm sure he's paid well. I'm sure he's paid really good in WWE. The guy probably made, my guess is he might have made $300,000 a year, maybe a little more, or maybe he only made over 150. Still, 150 is a lot of money. So Swagger had every right, in my opinion, to ask for his release. If I was Swagger, I'd do the same thing. I wouldn't want my talents to go to waste. And Swagger is 34 years old, just 1 year older than me. And if I was Swagger at 34, I would not want to waste my talents sitting backstage, watching the shows every single week, watching the pay-per-views every single week. Even the SmackDown brand pay-per-views, he couldn't get put on those. They wouldn't even use them on a SmackDown pay-per-view. That's sad. So the last appearance for Jack Swagger, his last appearance on TV was a loss to Baron Corbin on the October 18th edition of SmackDown Live. That's a long time ago. October 18th. That's a real long time ago. And Swagger would go on to say on the podcast that him and WWE were very far apart during contract negotiations. He says that WWE didn't value him at what he thought he was worth and didn't give him an opportunity to make enough money for his family. As a result, he asked for his release. I don't blame him. He said he wasn't given the opportunity to make enough money for his family. So he was probably paid under, probably under $70,000. Because I heard WWE sometimes a mid-card talent, they really lowball them and only offer them like $60,000 a year, $70,000 a year or less. Especially if they're not used on pay-per-views or TV. Because if you're used on a pay-per-view or WrestleMania, I believe you get a pay-per-view bonus check for being on a pay-per-view on the network. Or maybe they stopped paying pay-per-view bonuses. I don't know. But they could afford it because they got a lot of subscribers on the network that could pay for the pay-per-view bonuses for the talents. So Swagger says, basically, he asked for his release because he wasn't given the opportunity to make enough money for his family. Good for him. Good for him. I'm happy for him. He could definitely go wrestle for Ring of Honor, New Japan Pro Wrestling, any company in the United Kingdom he could probably wrestle for and be signed. A lot of indie companies, he could probably make good money on the indies every weekend. Also, he could go to Impact Wrestling. Maybe they would bring him in because 34 years old, that is not that old. Jack Swagger, in my opinion, still is in his prime until at least 40. The guy still has at least a good 6 years. At least a good 6 years of being in his prime. His best years, I'm going to talk a little bit about his career. This is not going to be a long video. I'll try to not go 15 minutes. So Swagger, the guy was an amateur wrestler, started wrestling at the age of 5 years old. He wrestled in high school with Danny Hodge's grandson. Danny Hodge, famous amateur wrestler. And he grew up 2 blocks away from him. Danny Hodge's grandson, he grew up 2 blocks away from him in Oklahoma. Perry, Oklahoma. Swagger, his real name is Donald Hager. Donald Jacob Hager Jr. That's Swagger's name. I had no clue his name was Donald. But if I was somebody named Donald because of who our president is, I would change my name. So I'm glad I wasn't named Donald. Anyways, Swagger, tremendous, great amateur wrestler in high school. Was a great amateur, went to the University of Oklahoma, where they recruited Jack Swagger as a 2-sport athlete in football and wrestling. He was a second-string defensive tackle. He was behind NFL players that would go to the NFL. He stopped playing football and concentrated full-time on wrestling in his sophomore year. And during his sophomore year, he was introduced to Jim Ross, who was WWE's head of talent relations at the time. And Ross encouraged Jack to contact him after graduation to see about a career in professional wrestling. At the 2005 NCAA Division I championships, he lost to the University of Phoenix, or University of Pennsylvania's Matt Feast in the second round. Anyways, Jack Swagger was named an All-American at the season's end while setting Oklahoma's record for most pins in a single season with 30. Jack Swagger graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a bachelor's degree in finance. Following his graduation, he was to work for some firm in Dallas, Texas, but signed with WWE after they offered him a contract the day he was scheduled to start. So he was in the developmental system in 2006 to 2008. He was in Deep South Wrestling. He had a dark match and a tryout. Then he was brought up to the main roster. He was in FCW. He had a gimmick in FCW where he was having an undefeated streak, and his first loss came in the form of a Raw dark match in 2008 in August when he lost to William Regal. So then he moves on And my eyes are just killing me. I don't know why. Swagger then moved on to the ECW, WWE's ECW brand. 2008-2009, he became the ECW World Champion. I don't remember who he defeated. He defeated Matt Hardy to win his first WWE ECW Championship. Then Swagger would go on an undefeated streak for a very long time, for about a month. And then he would lose to Fit Finlay in a non-title match in February on ECW. And then Swagger went into a pretty good feud with Christian. And let's see here, Christian lost the ECW Championship, or maybe Swagger did, after a reign of 104 days. So then Swagger moves up from WWE's ECW, which was kind of a developmental, but then he'd move on to the main roster and be traded to the Raw brand in 2009, 2010. So Swagger made his debut as part of a 3-on-1 gauntlet match against WWE Champion Randy Orton. And then on March 1st episode of Raw, Swagger defeated Santino Marella to qualify for the Money in the Bank ladder match at WrestleMania 26. Swagger then would win Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 26. I was happy for the guy when he won it. I thought he was a pretty good talent and had a lot of potential. Swagger then tried to cash in his Money in the Bank contract against John Cena, but he changed his mind. And then Swagger did cash in his contract on SmackDown on March 30th, 2010. So 2010, he cashed in, became World Heavyweight Champion. After he defeated Chris Jericho, after Jericho had been speared by Edge. So let's see if this page about Swagger's career talks about him being released. It does not. I don't believe. It wasn't updated. I don't see anything about his release. But good for Swagger. Jack Swagger. The guy was a good, talented wrestler. He was an amateur wrestler first. He became a very good pro wrestler. He switched over to pro wrestling, and he was like a natural. In my opinion, he was a natural. He was a very good pro wrestler. Very good amateur wrestler. And usually, if you're a very good amateur wrestler and you go to pro wrestling, then you're probably going to be a pretty damn good pro wrestler. Look at guys like Kurt Angle, Jack Swagger, Chad Gable, Jason Jordan. They were all great amateur wrestlers. Kurt Angle, of course, one of the best because he won an Olympic gold medal. And there's been many, many other amateur wrestlers that have gone to pro wrestling, and all of them, just about every one of them, I think, has succeeded pretty damn well. So Swagger has asked for his release, granted his release. I don't blame the guy. He probably wasn't making that good of money because the guy wasn't even being used. Probably wasn't being booked on house shows or on SmackDowns or pay-per-view. So how could he make a good living? Again, Jack Swagger asked for his release earlier this week, and he was granted it. I hope he ends up still wrestling in Ring of Honor or Impact Wrestling or New Japan. I'd like to see Swagger go to Ring of Honor or Impact Wrestling so I can still see the guy wrestle. If he goes to New Japan Pro Wrestling, I probably won't see him wrestle unless I look up his matches on the internet. So Jack Swagger released, but he asked for it. Good for him that he had the balls to do it and not just sit backstage like an idiot and just sit back there and just collect his paycheck, whatever he's making. It must have not been a lot, because he said he couldn't feed his family because they wouldn't book him, and they wouldn't pay him, and they wouldn't use him. And that's WWE's fault. they dropped the ball with Jack Swagger. I put Jack Swagger on the same level just about as Damien Sandow. Sandow was released, or maybe asked for his release, I don't remember. But Swagger is on the same level as a wrestler as Damien Sandow. Might even be better because he was an amateur wrestler. I don't know if Sandow was an amateur wrestler. Also, another great amateur wrestler that has been a great pro wrestler, Dolph Ziggler and Shelton Benjamin. They've been great amateurs, and Charlie Haas also. He was a great amateur. I can't think of anybody else. Verne Gagne. He was a great amateur wrestler. He was on the Olympic team, I believe, at one time. The Olympic wrestling team for the United States. And on the Olympics, I don't know the year, might have been the 1940s Olympics. One of those years. Jack Swagger, very talented guy. I put him on the same level as Damien Sandow, but Sandow was a way better talker. But Swagger did the best work of his career as cashing in his Money in the Bank. That was a cool moment for him in his career. Being in the Real Americans with Cesaro, they were a great tag team, I always thought. I believe they became tag champs at one point. And, of course, Jack Swagger getting Zeb Coulter as his manager, that was great. That really helped Jack. But sadly, Jack is no longer with WWE. I wish him the best in his future endeavors. Whatever he may do, I hope he succeeds and lands with another wrestling company or stays on the indies and keeps being a pro wrestler, because I think he's a damn good pro wrestler. Jack Swagger, your time in WWE was pretty long. You won the World Heavyweight title in 2010. You stayed around till 2017. And it's just a shame that creative couldn't come up with anything for Swagger. That's a shame. Will I miss Jack Swagger on TV? No, I won't. I just won't. But I hope he lands with Ring of Honor or Impact Wrestling, because I like to see what he could do in those companies. I think he could do a lot of good stuff and have a lot of great matches. This ends this episode of The List. Follow me on Twitter at WWE NXT Guy. Also, subscribe, like, comment, share my videos. This was a new episode of The List talking about Jack Swagger being released because he asked for it. Bye for now, everybody.